personal level, and just to let the audience know, I'm curious how you guys first became aware of each other. And I know Deragh had a small part in How Heavy This Hammer, which is the film we showed many years ago. But do you remember before that how you became aware of Deragh, and then vice versa, how Deragh, if you can say, maybe if you saw Kaz's films at that point? Just curious.
For me, yeah, it was I Used to Be Darker by Matt Porterfield. Yeah, I saw that, and then I think around that time, or maybe a year or two later, you moved to Toronto. And I think the first time I met you was at a Michael Smith screening. Yeah. So I think, yeah, and then very quickly we would run into each other at the Cinematography and had mutual friends. And yeah, I started thinking about writing a film for Deragh. She's a brief cameo in Hammer. And I think at that point, she plays a daycare teacher. So I think we were already talking about Anne and testing that out. And then from there, funnily enough, Matt has a scene in that film too. Yeah. So, and that would have been 2015 when we shot that, or so about a decade ago. But yeah, your side.
I remember that Matt Porterfield, the director of I Used to Be Darker, had, I think you guys had done a Kickstarter campaign or something where you made
Right.
like a DVD release of your short films with like a piece of wood. Yes, medium density, if I remember.
I made wood
DVDs. And I remember being like, what's that? But then yeah, when I moved to Toronto, it was more that I was attending Kaz's screening series every month. And yeah, it was more, I think I was just around.
Kaz, can you tell me a little bit about maybe just the general inspiration for this project? It feels, I mean, maybe not unnaturally personal, because all your films feel sort of personal, but this film feels, it has some kind of emotional dimension that maybe your other films haven't tapped into directly, at least in the relationship way. So I'm curious just like where the roots of that came from.
Yeah, I would say all my stuff is super personal, even stuff like Scaffold or Cutaway. But with Tower and Hammer, I remember thinking that as like a younger filmmaker, I had super angsty ideas, like and it was, with those films I worked a bit more with non-professional or non-union actors, and I love the process of taking those super personal ideas and filtering it through, tailoring it to a persona or someone I met. And I think the difference with this film is instead of it being someone like Irwin or Derek from those films, it's Matt and Deragh, who are my friends, and maybe almost they have a sense of what the story's about too, or have some of the kernels of where this story came from. And as much as it's maybe based off of things from my life, I think it also very quickly is pinned to lots of other relationships. So I think that really opens it up. And I think it's really that exploration. And I think that's why Matt wanted to be in the film. Maybe what Deragh did for different reasons too. But I think there was something too about our process in it that we wanted to keep it fresh. It's like a movie made with very little money, but I think it was something about that. How that feeling of how personal it was, or the sense of that loaded a lot of the scenes, I think, in different ways. It's not like just one source and exploring it, but I think very quickly it, from lots of different directions, had very sort of specific things that would load scenes or energize scenes or the whole story too.
Do you tend to write for people, like with people in mind? Like, were you thinking maybe Deragh and Matt would be interested in this?
Oh yeah, no, 100% for this film. This film, I mean, even more specifically, we made Anne at 13,000 Feet. When we made that film, I wasn't sure if putting Matt and Deragh in a scene together was a good idea. I feel like you felt the same way too, that we weren't sure what this would be like. But it was great. And that was my feeling, is I want a whole movie of these two. So on a very practical level, yeah, it would only be for these two, I think. Like if we swapped out Matt or Deragh, I don't know, but it would be a completely different film. So yeah, it was 100% conceptualized for the two of them. Yeah.
Well, I guess jumping off of that, Deragh, how do you, working with Matt, he seems not unlike some of his characters, so he seems, can be a live wire in a sense. So I'm curious what your, obviously you knew him before, but perception going in and how that was working with him. And because one of my favorite things about the film is that it's not a Matt Johnson performance, and I feel like a lot of times he is Matt Johnson in his films. And even though his name is that in this film, it's like the least Matt Johnson performance he's done in. So I don't know.
I mean, it's a real pleasure working with Matt. I think, I'm like a pretty sleepy person. Like I'm a pretty low energy person, and I think so is Kaz, so is Nikolai, so is Dan. Like we're all pretty low energy. So it's a real gift for me that I don't have time, I don't have space to be self-conscious because I just have to respond to Matt, because he does bring in, he has a lot of energy, but he also like the amount that he generates, like the amount of like ideas and images and story that comes out of him and is like constant and like never repeating, is really a gift to respond to. And kind of the funny battle that he and I ended up being in through the film was that he really wanted it to make sense, and like I really didn't want it to make sense, and he needed to believe for himself that like them being together was attainable, whereas for me it was much more like a dog chasing a squirrel, and when it catches it, it goes like but that's not to make it unimportant. Like it is a bit tragic. To me, there's a tragic dimension in that that they have to do it, and it means something to them, and they're obviously retrieving something by doing it. But it also like it's over. Like it can't exist anymore. The connection between them. There's no place for it. There's no space for it.
So
whereas Matt was just like they want to be together.
Maybe one more question for Gaz before we open it up. Visually, I'm interested in the film. You've developed an interesting visual style over your films. This one seems slightly looser, not completely like out of the ordinary, but like there is a slightly, just a slightly more casual feel to the aesthetic or the formal qualities of the film. So I'm curious if that was something you wanted to explore going in, or if that was like something dictated by the story, and then if that's something you want to continue to explore.
Yeah, I would say with this film, I knew that conversation was a big part of it, or I wanted this feeling of being pulled into a conversation, and then sometimes ejected from it. It's like that coffee, the cafe scene. So Nikolai, the DP of the film, who shot my last two films too, we knew that my usual aesthetic, and this is similar to it in a lot of ways, it's still very close and on faces, but Anne was a lot more frenetic, and we just kind of knew that be hard to follow a conversation. It's like that. So we experimented a lot with gimbals and Steadicam, just trying to find a way where we could keep a small footprint, but kind of smooth it out a bit and still sort of roam the city, go where we wanted to go. And normally when we approach a film, normally the first thing we shoot is something we're doing kind of as an experiment or to try to find the right atmosphere. So at Anna 13,000 feet, jumped out of a plane. That was the first thing that we shot. With this film, it was walking up Yonge Street. So again, just sort of, we spent a lot of time figuring out how we could do that. And that felt, that feeling that, I think as you put it, sort of a bit looser, this feeling of just being able, having time, having a pocket in the afternoon. Speaking of which, yeah, I talk so much about personal influences, but yeah, in terms of other influences, Chloe in the Afternoon, the Romer film, was also a starting point. Kind of came out of the pandemic. Deragh and I, we did like a Hong Sang-soo retro, but I think I was also going through Romer a lot too. But that was, again, but more so specifically a feeling of this time in the afternoon where you might just be hanging out with someone and it's like you realize you're maybe not doing that at home anymore. And it's just this sort of unusual thing that you stumble into. This was certainly an influence. So it's all those personal things and then that trying to capture that atmosphere. But yeah, I think all my films are a reaction to the previous films, like throwing a wrench in the process a little bit, keeping a lot of it the same, but mixing it up a bit. And initially with this film too, there's a 3-hour cut of this film where there's a lot more Matt, so it wasn't always as character-centric, but with, like in other films, you know, like there was throwing a wrench in the process of introducing Matt's character a lot more, but through the edit, we ended up going back to it being more Mara's film.
The Matt cut, okay. I have a question about Toronto too, but I'll open it up before asking if anyone has questions for Deragh or Kaz. Up there.
In your process, you have two leads that are like filmmakers themselves or storytellers themselves. Like, when do you incorporate them in during the writing process, and how does that sort of inform the story as you're making the film?
Yeah, no, that's yeah, absolutely. They're both filmmakers, artists, creators in their own right, and I think that's a big part of the genesis of this film. It's very much true about Nikolai or Isla, who cuts the film, and the producers, where a big part of the process is, it's a small film, but everybody is like contributing a lot and is trying to create space for that. And I think the way Deragh was speaking earlier about like the way Matt views the character, the way you view the character, is a big part of it. Their processes are completely different, but I think we all have like shared interests. Like I think we're all sort of interested in documentary a little bit, but just in totally different ways. Like Matt makes mockumentaries. You have your work with Sophia, and then my stuff as well too. That I think we all have similar ideals or types of integrity, but it manifests in different ways. So even the way that Deragh was talking about how they would view a relationship, that there's still that same core there, but it's the differences. So it aligns sometimes and it doesn't. But practically speaking, yeah, Matt just shows up on set. Matt just plays himself, or at least that's what he claims. So there's very little conversation with Matt. But I am adjusting it for him. I am rewriting scenes and introducing things. But yeah, Matt claims he just shows up on set and plays himself. Deragh, you had quite an interesting process with Emma, developing lectures, and lots of other sort of exercises working with those office hour scenes with students, which brings to moments like that amazing dialogue in the cafe scene where you're talking about what you were writing. Like I feel like you have a process that's quite different. So again, Matt plays a character named Matt Johnson. Deragh plays a character named Mara. We chose it because it kind of rhymes. So there's small bits of Deragh in it, but really it's a creation. Like it's not you. Or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I almost feel like it ends up being something similar to how you'd write an essay or something like that, where you have these different modes of gathering information. Like, yeah, I mean, there were all these just like weird patterns in how we made the film. Like, the passport photos, like you just see it happen twice now, and you see the pile of photos. But we had this pattern where we would just go and get passport photos taken, and every time we'd get the picture taken, we'd like make up a different story about like where she said she was gonna go with her passport. So you have that, and then you have like we took real students, and they would come into my fake office and tell me about these stories that they wanted to write about their lives, and I would respond to it and would be like gripped by this like horrifying responsibility of like their lives and how to help them talk about their lives. And then there's just like, I mean, to me it's just become so normal, but the thing that is so special about the way Kaz makes his films is just, you know, we shot 3 or 4 days a week for 8 months. There's like a couple breaks in there for people to go on vacations or whatever they had to do. But it just means that like, I don't know, weird things get absorbed into it, and a fun thing that ends up happening too is like when we needed the character of her colleague that eviscerates Matt, it was like, oh, well, I have a friend who would be really good at that, and so we brought in my friend Emma Healy because I knew she'd be able to like cut Matt down to size in like one sentence. So yeah, it's like the movies are very much about just like living in a city and going about your business, and there are really nice days like bringing Munir into the film and becoming really good friends with him through that process, and like really nice days of like shooting for 4 hours pretending we were married, and then taking like a 2-hour walk, and then going and watching Tar or something. You know, it's like it's all kind of built into your life in a really nice way.
Right there.
I had a question because I feel like a lot of your films, they have this kind of frenetic, fleeting, documentary-like approach. I'm wondering, speaking of their sort of process, how does that inform your editing? Are you editing along the way? Are you kind of sitting with what you shot after the day?
Yeah, it's a pretty idiosyncratic process that's kind of developed over the years, almost 15 or 20 years now, that I've had the same editor since film school. Her name's Isla. She's cut all my things. So in some ways, yeah, we have these instincts, even just in terms of coverage. It's pretty unusual coverage, pretty high ratio of shots. And I think it would be very hard to start fresh with someone new, navigating all of that. And yeah, I really rely on Isla and her touch and how her reactions to it, that I think, yeah, it's gotten to that level of collaboration where there's just a lot of instincts. But yeah, I love watching footage while we shoot. Yeah, as Deragh mentioned, we're shooting over quite a few months, so it's something that started out super practically. Like, we could only shoot this way. Locations were only available this time, actors were only available this time. That would always encourage, but now it's something that I think it's a bit of a luxury, strangely for me, that we could shoot it and then I can live with it for a bit, think about it, and then come up with other ideas that in my head I feel like at a certain point I'll start making movies faster, but I feel like I keep coming back. This was faster?
Yeah, 18 months for him.
Okay. Yeah, I guess this is also a bit of a COVID film too, so yeah, time in general was tricky. But yeah, no, and also while we're cutting it, there's a lot of a lot of experimentation with the structure, moving stuff around, a lot of test screenings that is constantly exploring it and rethinking it. Isla and I work together on a lot of short films together, so I feel like we like things, we have very short runtimes and really like to play with ellipses and sort of compressing things, removing things, cutting out whole sections. So again, cutting out the mat section. Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
This will end up being a bad question if the answer is no, but I just wanted to see if the scene where, at the party where people are grilling Mara about not liking music, was that influenced at all by Romero's film The Green Ray, the scene where Marie Rivera is getting grilled about being vegetarian?
Yeah.
And, yeah, speak.
Totally, yeah. Good eye or a good call on that. Yeah, no, it totally is. Yeah, we always talk about Chloe in the afternoon, but yeah, that moment, and it's funny. That's like also one of Romer's only improvised films, or one of his first improvised films after Full Moon in Paris. So maybe that's partially why it aligns so nicely. But yeah, it is sort of based off of something I heard Deragh say, or
I also don't like music.
but yeah, so it's one of those scenes I wouldn't have thought of, or it's one of those things that, where life is a bit stranger than fiction, almost. I don't know, just the idea of that you being married to a husband and having those opinions. But it sort of made sense, and also at that table, everyone there is a musician, and they're telling actual anecdotes about touring together. So yeah, it just ended up being the perfect scene. Instead of being about being a vegetarian, it's about not liking music.
But it is the same thing of
Yeah,
her feeling more and more ostracized.
that social
And
dynamic.
thinking that she was saying something baby cute.
Yeah.
Right there.
It's like kind of a non-sticky question, but I was curious, like, what your preference of how that your writing is so nice and really even, and I'm curious, it sounds like you shoot a lot practically and fast, and I'm curious that you get such even exposure and shadows and things quickly.
Oh yeah, so in terms of the lighting, yeah, Nikolai really is amazing. That he really, this is the first film where he had a first AC, and some of the scenes he'd have a few gaffers and people helping him set up. But I remember when I first met him, he used to be like a skater. He told me about I think he'd broken his leg recently, and I felt like we needed that type of person. That he's the perfect mix of that, where he is. So even just all those scenes that we shot, walking backwards up young street, and people just yelling at us, that he's so good at sort of composure and sort of being calm and creating when a lot of things are happening quickly and on the fly. That he's got this amazing temperament. But I think he's also really, luckily, the third time we've shot together, that I know some DPs would want a bigger canvas or more tools at their disposal, but he's really great at fine tuning and slowly, incorporating subtle new things to sort of help us find light and find images, and even like the Niagara Falls scene is something that happened very spontaneously, but his instincts, like he had one of those, what do you call them, like spinners. He just luckily had that in his kit, and we were able to wrap the camera in plastic and somehow get this very cinematic moment that happened quite spontaneously. Wasn't for sure that we were going to go down there and get under the water like that.
He has to deal with a lot of fluorescent lights.
A lot of fluorescent lights, yeah.
The daycare.
Right, yeah, Dan, yeah. A lot of, he's great with practical light and coming up with really ingenious solutions. And also, he has an amazing relationship with Deragh, just in terms of, in 50,000 Feet, he's pulling his own focus, but there's a choreography between them, and even the same way I was talking about, Isla, the editor, I feel like that happens a bit with Nikolai and Deragh, that they have instincts and they've worked together so much that there's a lot of very, yeah.
7 films with Nikolai.
Right, yeah, so Nikolai's also shot for Antoine Bourges and Sofia Bogdanovich, Measures for a Funeral, most recently. Yeah. And Rodriguez as So that we were both in. Yeah.
It might be more than 7. I feel like 7 was the early.
You mentioned a couple times different streets in Toronto. I'm just curious, did you conceive of the film as being a sort of Toronto film? It feels very. We were talking earlier, just joking about Los Angeles Plays itself. I'm just curious about your ideas about representing a city. I think you also made a response to someone causing or raising issue with your representation of the Toronto subway so recently online. So I'm curious if you can respond to these accusations.
Yeah, there was a funny tweet about someone accusing us of shooting at subway stations out of order, which was just incorrect. Yeah, it was. But I guess it is a loaded thing that Toronto is very much like LA, or maybe worse, that many films are shot in Toronto as another city. And the few examples of films set in Toronto, like Adam McGowan's Chloe or Take the Swallows, Sarah Polley, have quite big leaps. Like you're, suddenly 45 minutes across the city. So I think there are one or two moments where people have picked it out. I think it's more of the Ithaca stuff is where we're cheating a bit, but I think the Toronto stuff is pretty accurate. I went to film school downtown, at a school called, it's now called TMU, which is right at Yonge Dundas, which is sort of like, not the greatest part of Toronto. It's kind of like our Times Square. It's very touristy. So yeah, but I think it's funny, all my films are set in Toronto, and I remember when I think Tower played in New York, people were like, this is a film about the suburbs. And I'm like, no, this is Queen and Spadina, like this is like in the city. So I think wanted it to feel very downtown, or just to get some of the skyscrapers walking up Yonge Street. It is kind of a random walk. And I think it is sort of not a usual walk. It's sort of like you've run into this person and you're just walking a direction from the university. It's not where you necessarily pick to walk, which I kind of liked the feeling of. So yeah, I think it's a fine line. Like I think a misstep of a lot of Canadian films is like it feels like a postcard, or you get like the CN Tower, or we do have Niagara Falls, but again, that was really to prove that they were on a road trip and actually left the city. So then we can shoot the rest in Mississauga. Yeah.
We can probably do a couple more if we have anyone else. No more? Right, here we go.
I wanted to ask, in the scene after Matt's father passes away and he calls Mara, it's the first time in the film that it's kind of revealed that Mara hasn't told her partner about Matt. I was wondering if that was kind of intentional, and whether there was kind of the significance to Mara keeping that all kind of secret.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think an interesting thing that I was talking about Niagara Falls earlier too is in the initial version of the script they never kissed, so it was more of an emotional affair. And I guess it's one of those things too. Him asking that question, like he dropped out of driving her, somebody else drove. Like I think it's on both of their parts. This sort of question, and Munir, I think I like that him being so aloof, but to a point of it being maybe a bit inconsiderate or a bit invisible. I don't know, how did you feel with those things there, however, like Munir's, you know what I mean? Like it's, like there's something I love about him that he's, it took us a long time to find Munir in the casting process, that he was, I guess, the biggest actor that we brought in, like even like Emma. What's interesting about Emma, jumping all over the place, you said you went to, I didn't quite piece that together, but you and Emma did a creative writing undergrad together, that there is like some deep sort of connections there. But Munir was totally outside of our peer group, maybe one or two mutual friends, and that's how we found him. But we wanted somebody that felt sort of part of the world, but also like the opposite of Matt. I think initially we thought of other people, and they all were kind of similar, like uniquely charismatic kind of people. And Veneer was so wonderful that he's such a likable, handsome, mild-mannered guy that he's quiet but somehow appealing. At least that's how I view him. But I think in that moment that you highlighted of him being like, or you having not said that to him and him not caring too much, that there's kind of a sadness or a real distant part there that I also quite like about him. Even in so many scenes, he's so great. Like his one-word answers, where he's like, "Oh yeah, for sure, cool." You know, like he's like it's reasonable, but it's also you can kind of feel, yeah, a bit of a distance. Oh yeah, white people would rather break up, or no, would rather kill each other than break up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a funny thing that Matt and Veneer were never on set at the same time. So it was like they met at the rap party. So it was like very different days, of like Veneer days and Matt days. But I do think that there's something, I mean, I think Mara's being a jerk for sure. But I also think that there's like, she's, like when you're with someone, they don't get to know who you were in the past, you know? And it's almost like she's getting to be her past self in this moment. So she doesn't feel there's like a need to confess it, like it's hers in that way that you can sometimes be maybe a bit vindictive in a relationship, being like, no, this is mine, this is my secret, and you don't get to see it.
If there's no one else, we can. Oh, there's one. Let's go there.
I just wanted to ask Deragh like a follow-up question about your sort of performance style, like with your work with Sophia Bodovich as well, where it sort of blurs documentary and fiction. And it sort of seems like with this character, like you mentioned some things that are sort of from yourself that you put into characters. So I guess I'm just curious about your process of developing characters and separating yourself or putting yourself in. How do you do
that? Yeah, I mean, maybe not fully, but sometimes I can almost think of it as like a satirization of myself, like who I'd be if I were a little less self-aware or a bit more selfish maybe. But I think because I really, for whatever reason, feel like very wary about creating a character. Like, I don't know, because then I feel like I've made a decision and I'm trying to find a way to show it. Whereas I think if you can try and like give a character an impulse or try and give them something that is like a bit more of an action and you don't actually completely get to control who the character is. Like with Anne, it was more that she knew that she was making people uncomfortable, but like me, hopefully, that can kind of calibrate myself to other people's comfort. Like she doesn't, she just kind of keeps pushing. Whereas I think with, I don't know, I think I always want to play characters that give nothing away, but then I'm not very good at giving nothing away, so it becomes a little more erratic.
I meant to say this earlier when we were talking about Matt, but I would say there's a lot of times where I felt like I couldn't direct Matt without Deragh, if that makes sense. That Matt is so good at, like you were saying earlier, like energy creating more and more. Deragh's so great and knowing when not to speak or to cut through it. So often a lot of scenes where I would shoot with Matt without Deragh, people would just grow bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like a different idea about improvisation. All the dialogue in this film is improvised. We talk about that, but that's normally a big speaking point. But Matt's background is almost like Second City. But it's so great having how much you have it grounded in those sort of silences and sort of pulling it back to reality, or that was like a big special ingredient or essential part of this film, was that aspect of, I think, some of the things you just articulated now with your process and the things that you look for in sort of creating a character that doesn't reveal too much or is very much grounded in a different type of reality.
But then it also is like a lucky thing, probably even more in Sophia's films, that I can talk about like one particular anxiety that I'm having, and then Kaz or Sophia have a story and they're kind of open enough that I can kind of put this one little thing that I've been thinking about as well, and it can be inside of that story. Like I think about this thing. My dad's a theater actor, and he would do this thing when he was in plays where he would be like, okay, the top of the third act, I cross to this side and I'm gonna give like this hand gesture. And so I would like recognize, I'd be watching a fiction, but I would know that my dad was like sending this hand signal to me within the film. And I always feel like, I don't know, in films like I'll often like wear a friend's shirt or wear a boyfriend's shirt, or I'll have these like little things planted in it, or I'll have like little bits of myself planted in it.
I think we can probably break here. Kaz and Deragh will be with us in the lobby and then the lounge if you want to grab a drink with us. Say hi. Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah. I mean, while I'm here and in a space with other people, I've just been making a point to just kind of all be in recognition together of what's happening in Palestine and in Lebanon. And I mean, we're here in the United States to be pushing for an arms embargo and an end to the genocide and an end to the occupation. Thanks.
Shout out to Ben who's doing projection and working the bar, so come and